Hi, I'm NCantara. This is going to be my informative speech. This is my crowd, audience. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast, and you had 1,833 deaths. Part of the reason the number was so high with those deaths is because it took so long for disaster relief to get there. And one of the biggest parts of that was helicopters coming in to remove some of those people who were stranded because of all the flooding. Now, UAS, or unmanned aircraft systems, could have helped out and possibly saved some of those lives. And let me tell you how they could do that. All right, if they were approved into the national airspace, which at the current time we are not, we would have been able to have been there within a couple of hours of that hurricane hitting, and we could have been able to identify some of these stranded people. We have many capabilities, including infrared cameras and day TV cameras, that could have identified and seen those people. UAS has been restricted outside of the national airspace and only into military operating zones because FAA does not believe that we have the see and avoid capability for manned aviation, for manned pilots, okay? Now, we still are trained to the same capabilities and the same standards, but they still feel that we shouldn't be allowed in that airspace. But some of the other capabilities we can use and help out with are other disaster reliefs. Let's say there's wildfires in California or in Arizona or in Texas. UAS could be used to identify where that front line is and where we need to block or help out, or if there's also people stranded, we can identify some of those people. We could also be used in the mountains in, say, Colorado, when someone goes missing in the mountains because they're hiking or they're stranded by an avalanche. That's also some of the stuff that we can use. One of the other big uses where we are being used but could be expanded exponentially is on the border, okay? In Arizona, there's a little post called Fort Huachuca, and that's where the UAS training center is. And they have about a 30-mile restricted area where they're allowed to fly. However, that crossing from Nogales to Huachuca City is more than 100 miles. And that is the highest crossed section of the border in the U.S. Thousands of people cross there illegal every day, and we find a bunch of them. Now, if we're allowed into the national airspace, we can cover that entire stretch, but we are not allowed to do that. FedEx, I'm going to talk about that as well. FedEx has actually flown a 747 to Europe from the U.S. unmanned. When I say unmanned, they had a pilot on board for a backup. However, they used computer systems to fly that entire plane over there. If they were allowed to do that in the States, think of how much that cost would lower down for FedEx. Now, obviously, you lose jobs with that, but that's also one other use for it. But in closing, one of the biggest ones I feel and why UAS should be allowed into the national airspace is because we can help Americans and we can save lives by doing some of these disaster reliefs, manning the border, and that sort of stuff. And